There was a young man who was about to undergo his first operation, and naturally he was quite nervous about it. And he said to his surgeon, "I'm terribly nervous because this is the first time I've had an operation." And the surgeon said, "Don't you worry, because this is the first time I've ever operated." I think it was last year that I had an email from one of the members of this church in which he introduced the theme of Mary. And I had to confess that I had never in my whole ministry ever preached a sermon about Mary, nor had I ever heard a sermon preached about Mary. So when in doubt, I went down to see Father Brendan, and he gave me a book to read. It was interesting. Didn't agree with everything in it, but it was the account of a debate that was going on with the Church of England in England and the Catholic Church in England. And most of it was about Mary, the mother of Jesus. Now, we could spend a lot of time this morning talking about the virgin birth and the perpetual virginity of Mary, and whether Jesus had real brothers and sisters, or whether they were cousins, or whether they were stepchildren. If you want a definitive answer, read Wikipedia. It has a wonderful article, several pages. For the Roman Catholic Church, Mary is the greatest of all the saints. For the Orthodox Church, Mary is involved with the salvation of the world. The surprising one was the Quran. Islam has Mary, the only named person in the Quran, 70 times in fact, and they identify Mary as the greatest woman to have ever lived. And then you get to us. What about the protos? Well, what does it say? Protestants pay scant attention to Mary. And that's probably true. It'd be interesting to take a vote this morning on those of you who had actually heard a sermon about Mary, the mother of Jesus. So who is she? It came as a bit of a shock, I suppose, when I was reading up on this, that the Apocrypha, one of those books that was circulating at the time of the New Testament books, the Apocrypha describes her as a 12 to 14-year-old unmarried mother. And we can only imagine from our own experience the scandal and the rumours that would have gone. She came from Nazareth, a tiny place with no past, with no future. It's not mentioned in the Old Testament. It's not mentioned in the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I doubt if he'd ever known of it if Jesus hadn't lived there. You remember when they came to Nathanael and said, "We have found the Christ. He comes from Nazareth." You've got to be joking. Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? It's interesting when I was reading again on this about the link that some people make between Miriam and Moses and Mary and Jesus. You may remember that Pharaoh ordered that all but male childs were to be thrown into the river and drowned. And Miriam, his sister, said, "Well, I know someone who'll look after him," and saved his life. And of course, in the story of Jesus, Herod decided to kill all the male children 2 years of age and under, and it was Mary and Joseph who saved his life. Mary doesn't appear very prominently in the New Testament. We have her here in the birth story. We have her on Cana of Galilee when Jesus performed his first miracle. And her words there are indicative of what we might do today. She says to the people who are given instructions by Jesus, whatever he says to you, do it. And that wouldn't be a bad motto, would it, for us? And then at the Annunciation, she says, I am the Lord's servant. I belong to the Lord, body and soul. Let it happen to me as you say. So Mary comes to us as a willing servant who trusted God and obeyed his will. Mary, a poor girl from an insignificant village. It says to me that God can use anybody. An outstanding example of a life dedicated to God. A young, poor female who shows trust and obedience. We find Mary at the cross, one of those words that we were looking at. Jesus says, woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother. And then Mary appears again in the book of the Acts when in the upper room after the resurrection, she is there with the disciples. And so here we are on Annunciation Day, thinking of this woman who gave her life, dedicated to serving her master, and who comes to us today with this important message. Behold, the servant of the Lord. Be it unto me according to your will. For me, the message of Annunciation Day is trust and obey. Amen.